evening. This is the I-24 News Evening Edition. I'm Lucy Arish, and these are the headlines. A new proposal from Iran as Western powers prepare for crucial talks next week. The Nobel Prize for Chemistry goes to 3 scientists, 2 of them Israelis, for their work developing computer models for complex chemical reactions. And an exclusive interview with I-24 News, former head of Palestinian security Jibril Rajoub slams Hamas and says the Islamist group has lost its compass. Good evening. A week before the P5+1 negotiators meet with their Iranian counterparts in Geneva, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Iran is prepared to limit its nuclear program in return for a reduction of international sanctions. According to the report, ahead of the talks, Iran is considering to offer to stop enriching uranium to the 20% level, to open the nuclear facilities to more intrusive international inspection, and close the facility next to Qom. And with me now is I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalef. Good evening, Tal.
Good evening, Lucy.
So what do the Israelis have to say about this?
Well, first of all, we might say that we're a week before resuming negotiations, and we're going to hear many of these leaks because actually negotiations are starting again. So we're going to have leaks from both sides. Many of them will probably be denied. We're getting just a report just now that this report was denied too. So we'll be hearing, and what's on the table is that the Iranians want to come to Geneva and to get a deal. The foreign minister Zarif, the Iranian foreign minister Zarif, on Sunday, gave an interview in which he said that Iran expects the West to come with a new proposal, not an old one that was that had been discussed.
I'm just getting a sign that from our editor that Iranian official Zarif is saying that now we'll never close Fordo.
Okay, well. Well, yes. The proposal today in the Wall Street Journal was quite generally outlined. It didn't talk specifically about Fordo, but it talked about a few elements of a proposal, a new proposal that's very close actually to proposals that have been discussed in the past in past negotiations. From the Israeli point of view, the Israelis say today this is a joke. The problem with the 20% enrichment uranium, about a year ago, Israel was willing to accept 20% enrichment, a level of 20% enrichment. But today, they say, an Israeli official tells us today, it might have had some value last year, but since then there's been a dramatic enhancement in the program. And they now have enough centrifuges that even if they stop enrichment at 20%, they'll still have breakout capabilities. And while the whole world is worried about a nuclear weapon, Israel is worried about nuclear breakout capabilities. And Israel is interested in keeping Iran away from the breakout capability. So from the Israeli point of view, this is a non-starter to discuss. But of course, we might say Israel is not one of the negotiators. Israel is just pressuring on the outside. The Iranians are pressuring on the outside too. The deputy foreign minister is on his way now to Russia and China and try to prepare their side before the meeting, and the Israelis have been meeting with Europeans and Americans and trying to tell them, please stay tough on the sanctions.
So we just were reported today that the Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif was hospitalized in what happened to him?
Well, Mohammad Javad Zarif is actually the chief nuclear negotiator, so I think everyone is hoping that he gets better by next week, where he's supposed to meet the P5+1 representatives in Geneva. Apparently yesterday there was a quote in a newspaper called Kayhan. It's a big newspaper considered very close to the Ayatollah, to the spiritual leader Khamenei. And this quote quotes Zarif as saying in a closed meeting in Parliament that he said that Rouhani's conversation with Obama last month in September was a mistake, and so was the length of his meeting with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Zarif didn't like the report, and he got home. And apparently he went to the hospital with stress and pain, but when he got home, he posted on his Facebook page, "This morning, after seeing the headline of one newspaper, I got severe back and leg pain. I couldn't even walk or sit." So this is what happened to him. Even though the Iranians banned Facebook, the Iranian foreign minister seems very fond of it, we might say.
Yes, Tal Shalev, it's very interesting. Thank you very much for this. And moving on, Hamas chief Khalid Mashal visited Ankara and met with the Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan. The visit comes as rumors suggest Mashal currently is exiled in Qatar. And now he's searching for a new place to set up base. I-24 News reporter Eli Ochenberg has more.
Increasingly isolated since the loss of a key ally in deposed Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi, Hamas leader Khalid Mashal traveled to meet one of the few world leaders still willing to embrace him, Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The Prime Minister's office in Ankara was the venue for the meeting that lasted 3 hours, and the content of the discussion is not completely known. But the visit of Mashal's comes amid rumors he has worn out his welcome in Qatar, where he currently resides, and is looking for a new place to live. Erdogan has forged close ties to Hamas, and this is Mashal's third visit to the Turkish capital since September 2012. The two last met in June to discuss reconciliation efforts between the rival Palestinian factions Fatah and Hamas. Erdogan has long announced plans to visit Hamas-run Gaza Strip, but report says the trip was not on the agenda of his talks with Mashal.
And joining us now in the studio is Ali Waqid, I-24 News analyst. Ali, good evening. Thank you very much for coming to the studio. So Hamas is now more isolated than ever with the Muslim Brotherhood out of power in Egypt. How is it going to affect the region right now?
Well, the development with Hamas shows how fluid is the situation in the Middle East. Until like 3-4 months ago, Hamas was on his top. He has the Muslim Brotherhood in power in Egypt. He has Turkey very solid in the internal level, and Qatar very strongly supporting Hamas.
Are they hoping that Turkey will be the new ally?
Hamas is facing a kind of crisis with the new emir of Qatar. Hamas lost the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Hamas lost Syria, where he bet also there on the opposition. And since he bet on the opposition in Syria, he lost also Iran. So if we look on the spectrum, we see that Hamas does not have any Syrian or Iranian support. Turkey is a little bit occupied with the internal situation. Egypt, the situation, we know what's happening there. And Hamas is looking for the new patron. Hamas is looking for a new strategic ally. For the moment, we are hearing that Khalid Mashal was even asked by the Qataris to look for a place to host Hamas bureaus. So for the moment, Hamas is living this crisis with the Middle East, his former Middle East allies, but also with inside Hamas. Dr. Mahmoud al-Zahar, maybe the strongest person of Hamas in Gaza Strip, was all along the way against taking position vis-a-vis what's happening in Syria, and now he is a little bit isolated because he is expressing a very independent and a very critic position towards what Khalid Mashal and the Hamas leadership decided in the Syrian file and in the Egyptian file. So
let's talk a little bit from the Turkey side. Is it in their best to make an alliance with Hamas?
As for the Turkish, I don't think it is for their best, since Turkey didn't give up yet its hope to join the EU. Turkey still wants to solve the strategic difference with Israel. Turkey have a strategic interest with the US. Therefore, I don't see Turkey giving this backup to Hamas like Qatar did, or like Syria or Iran. The problem is more Hamas from being a group that all the countries in the region wanted to have a comprehensive relationship with the organization, is now very isolated. But this isolation is being translated on the ground. We see that Hamas is trying to rebuild its cells in the West Bank in order to send signs that we are here and that we are an organization that should be taken into consideration even in the new equation of the Middle East and especially of the region.
These are going to be very interesting days in the upcoming days for Hamas and to see how it's developing. Thank you very much, Ali Waqid.
Thank you, Lucy.
And moving on, U.S. military aid to Egypt and whether or not it should continue has been in question since the ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi more than 3 months ago. In the last 24 hours, there have been contradicting reports on where it stands. I-24 News reporter Roni Ben Bassat has the details.
Egypt has been facing ongoing violence since the ouster of Mohamed Morsi on July 3rd. But now, after months of uncertainty, it seems the clashes may cost the country in financial aid. According to CNN reports, the United States is expected to make a decision on withholding military aid to Egypt by the end of this week. The United States has long provided its Middle Eastern ally with about $1.55 billion in annual aid, including $1.3 billion in military assistance. After the military crackdown 3 months ago, the Obama administration encouraged the Egyptian interim government to reach a diplomatic solution with Morsi supporters, but was reluctant to officially describe the situation in the country as a military coup. U.S. President Barack Obama addressed the issue of financial aid to Egypt in his speech at the UN General Assembly.
We'll continue support in areas like education that directly benefit the Egyptian people. But we have not proceeded with the delivery of certain military systems, and our support will depend upon Egypt's progress in pursuing a more democratic path.
U.S. officials who spoke on condition of anonymity said the administration is now leaning towards continuing to withhold most of the $585 million that has yet to be transferred to Egypt. It is not, however, expected to affect the promotion of counterterrorism, such as maintaining security in Sinai. On Tuesday night, the White House released a statement denying the reports, saying that the aid relationship with Egypt will continue, but its precise future would be announced in the coming days.
And an Egyptian court today set November 4th as the opening for the trial of ousted President Mohamed Morsi on charges of inciting the murder of protesters. And on the phone with me right now is Stephen Cook, Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington. Mr. Cook, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So how likely is it that the U.S. will cut its aid to Egypt?
I think it seems very likely that the administration is going to do something despite the conflicting signals coming from the White House. I think it's been clear for quite some time that the administration has been looking for some way to signal its disapproval of events in Egypt.
So what is the strategic relationship between the U.S. and Egypt at this point?
Well, it remains largely the same that it's been over the course of the last 3 decades, but I think for 2 reasons it's likely to change. One, because of the political changes in Egypt and the image of the United States in Egypt at this point is likely to drive Egyptian leaders to distance themselves from the United States. And for the very fact that the relationship is 4 decades old and really just runs on bureaucratic inertia at this point. It has not been updated since the mid-1970s. All of this is a recipe for ultimately a distancing between the United States and Egypt.
So what does it mean, distancing between the United States and Egypt? Because for the last few months, what we are seeing in Egypt is that the situation is deteriorating. So the U.S. is deciding not to put step and try to help to make the situation better in Egypt?
Well, I think from the perspective of the United States, its ability to influence or drive events in Egypt is rather limited given the high-stakes political contest that's going on in Egypt right now. And then from the perspective of Egyptians, the United States has outworn its welcome, and that the United States just doesn't provide enough aid or the kind of support that Egyptians would like, which is not to have support from the United States at all. Egyptian part of the uprising against Hosni Mubarak was about Egyptian national empowerment and dignity, and that is connected to Egypt's relationship with the United States.
So if I'm understanding, how is it going to affect, for the last few months, we saw the U.S. withdrawing from the decision to intervene in what is happening in Syria. And right now we're seeing that the U.S. is actually not intervening in what is happening in Egypt and stopping the aid. How is it going to affect the image of the United States outside, or maybe how it's going to affect the image of Barack Obama?
Well, I can certainly understand from the perspective of, for example, Jerusalem or Cairo, that the United States does not look like the strong global leader that it once was. But I think that I think the way in which the administration is assessing the situation in both Egypt and Syria is that there are just some problems, some issues that are not conducive to the traditional tools of American diplomacy. It was fairly clear before the July 3rd coup d'etat that the United States counseled the Egyptian government against the Egyptian military against taking this step, but the Egyptians calculated their own interests based on local conditions. The turmoil in the region is such that an outsider, even one as powerful and prestigious as the United States, has very limited tools available to affect the trajectory of events in those countries.
Mr. Stephen Cook, thank you very much for this insight, and thank you very much for the conversation with us. And we're moving on. 2 IDF soldiers were lightly injured in the Golan Heights today from 2 mortar shells fired from Syria. One of the soldiers suffered shock and the other was hit by shrapnel. It is not known whether the attack was intentional or was a spillover from the ongoing Syrian civil war on Israel's northern border. In the last year, there have been several incidents of sporadic cross-border exchanges of fire between Israeli and the Syrian forces on the Golan Heights. And we're moving on for the big U.S. subject. U.S. President Barack Obama is set to nominate Federal Reserve Vice Chairwoman Janet Yellen to become the first woman to lead the U.S. Central Bank. The nomination, one of the most important decisions of the president's second term, requires a Senate confirmation, of course. Meanwhile, 9 days after the U.S. government shutdown began, President Barack Obama and Republicans House Speaker John Boehner are still internetched in their positions. According to officials, President Barack Obama is expected to invite Republicans to the White House to discuss the current crisis before the debt ceiling is reaching on October 17th. I-24 News reporter Uli Shapiro has more.
The government shutdown entered its 9th day today, and reconciliation between Republicans and Democrats is not in sight, at least not in the near future.
My suggestion to the Speaker has been and will continue to be, let's stop the excuses. Let's take a vote in the House. Let's end this shutdown right now. Let's put people back to work.
President Barack Obama made it clear in his speech last night that he will not give up to the Republicans' high demands, even if the consequences are reckless.
The more extreme parts of the Republican Party stop forcing John Boehner to issue threats about our economy. We can't make extortion routine as part of our democracy.
Despite the shutdown, Obama is not wasting any time. Obama said to announce today his nominee for the head of the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, who is now serving as the vice chairwoman, the current chairman Ben Bernanke. Yellen, a former professor in Harvard University, is known for her support for increased federal money printing, which could help the president to complete his famous Obamacare. Her nomination is perhaps a clear statement to the Republicans that Obama and his administration will not back off from their original position.
The long and short of it is there's going to be a negotiation here. We can't raise the debt ceiling without doing something about what's driving us to borrow more money and to live beyond our means.
Time is running out toward the 17th of the month, the last deadline for the debt ceiling increase. Analysts warn that after this date, the implication on the American economy will be devastating and irreversible. But for now, when the Democrats insist on keeping their social programs and the Republicans insist on opposing them, the only remaining question is, who will blink first?
Yes, and we are coming up on this evening edition. An exclusive interview with I-24 News former head of Palestinian security Jibril Rajoub slams Hamas and says the Islamist group has lost its compass. And a look, now you're seeing Jibril Rajoub, but a look at an intriguing and unique theater production in New York, which will ensure we will sleep no more. Don't go anywhere, 2 minutes break, and I'll be back. Welcome back. And the week of Nobel Prize announcements continues. 3 scientists won the Nobel in chemistry today. They're awarded for their work in developing computer models that stimulate chemical processes, a revolutionary tool for engineers and the design of drugs. More from I24 News reporter Giles Bibliter.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the 2013 Nobel Prize in Chemistry to
Professors Martin Karplus, Michael Levitt, and Aryeh Warshel. The 3 Jewish-American scientists, 2 of which have Israeli citizenship, pioneered the use of computer models to mirror and thus help to understand complex chemical processes.
In short, what we develop is a way which requires a computer to take the structure of a protein and then to eventually understand how exactly it does what it does. Like if you have an enzyme that digests food and the structure exists, you want to understand how this is happening, and then you could use it, for example, to design drugs.
With a population of less than 8 million people, Israel punches well above its weight when it comes to the Nobel. Warshel and Levitt are the 5th and 6th Israelis to win the prize in chemistry in under a decade, and the 11th and 12th Israeli winners overall. The 3 scientists will share a cash prize of $1.25 million.
And joining me right now in the studio is Professor Jacob Anglister from the Department of Structural Biology at the Weizmann Institute. Thank you very much for coming to our studio. So explain to me, for this poor girl, what is exactly the achievement in very easy words, if you can.
I will try. It will be a little bit different from what Aryeh Warshel described. Maybe you want to describe it more simply. But I guess you know that we have atoms, and atoms build molecules. Some of the molecules are amino acid, and then they build proteins, they build our genetic material, the DNA, and so on.
Okay.
And when these atoms exist in a molecule, they exist in a certain array, and they interact with each other. So what is the, let's say, the achievements, the great achievement of Aryeh Warshel and Mike Levitt, who were actually students of the late Schneur Lifson at the Weizmann Institute, is that they describe this interaction in mathematical terms that are very easily to understand. Like, you know, they describe 2 atoms that are connected by a spring, or they have like electrostatic interaction between them, like positive charge attracts negative charge and things like this, that atoms will not bump into each other and penetrate into each other. And then they have a set of equations, mathematical equations, for each of these interactions. And by computing all this interaction, they are able to come up with the structure of the molecule, starting with small molecule and then going to bigger and bigger molecule, and even like a protein, the DNA material, and so on.
Where does it put Israel on the map in the chemistry world, achieving such a big prize?
Where does it put Israel? So I'm familiar with this work from something like the late 70s. And I can say that the Weizmann Institute was the Mecca of this subject, and very prominent scientists from all over the world came to the Weizmann Institute and studied all these revolutionary methods that were developed by Schneur Lifson, by Arnie Agler, by Michael Levitt. And, you know, it was really amazing from all over the world.
Who left Israel, by the way, which is a big loss to Israel in the scientific terms and for for us, basically, here in Israel.
Right. So Aryeh Marshall actually had to leave because, you know, like Schneur Lifson had many students, and there was like competition between them, and the Weizmann had to decide who is going to stay at the Weizmann Institute and continue. It was a mistake maybe not to join forces and to hire several people and then create a critical mass at the Weizmann Institute and continue to be the Mecca for the entire world.
Of course.
So this was in a way a mistake. So we put all the cards on Michael Levitt. Michael Levitt was like a head of the department at the Weizmann Institute. He continued this work, was very, very successful. But then what was required for the field is very powerful computers. And these were not available in Israel. They were available in other places, like in the US, in England. And Michael actually had to travel from one place to the other, do the computing, buy computing time everywhere. And it was kind of difficult. Also, he became, in a way, isolated in Israel. And he got, you know, an offer that
it's like a big soap opera in the scientific world in Israel. It's very interesting.
It is a bigger soap opera than what you can imagine.
It's a bigger soap opera than I can imagine, and I would love to hear about it more. Professor Jacob Anglister, thank you very much for this and for coming to our studio.
Thank you.
We're moving on. Our I-24 News Ramallah correspondent Mohammed Najib sat down today. Our guest just left the studio. Our I-24 News Ramallah correspondent Mohammed Najib sat down today with former head of the Palestinian Security Forces, Jibril Rajoub. Here's what he had to say about Hamas, Fatah, and peace with Israel.
Hamas has to review itself. They carry responsibility for the crisis they're going through. They lost their compass. They have exaggerated their relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood movement. They should work on untying this connection. They should behave from a point of being part of the Palestinian liberation movement with a Muslim view, with a Palestinian identity and nationality being the compass for their movement. On a second issue, they should accept the basis of political pluralism and the ballot box being a tool for political partnership and making political differences. But our brothers in Hamas are those who were mistaken in choosing their allies, and they hold responsibility for the crisis they're going through. Fatah was and will be a bridge and framework and a savior for all the political, vital and national Palestinian work. Peace is not a Palestinian interest, it's an international interest, and the interest of the world is to put an end to the struggle. I think it's also an Israeli interest. The Israelis should decide if they are a part of the Middle East or if they are an alien body. If so, then the alien body should be removed. Now we're in a stage of taking a decision to end the conflict. Either we stay in circle, which will determine the stability of the region and will be a source for world peace way, or the international tools should be provided to forcing Israel to accept a solution according to UN resolutions. My fellow, this is an Israeli-American spring par excellence. This is a destruction for the Arab region, it's a destruction for the Arab capabilities, it's a destruction for the Arab armies and the Arab will in the Middle East.
Yes, and we're moving on. The streets of Saudi Arabia are already filled with millions arriving to begin the annual pilgrimage to Mecca, the fifth pillar of Islam, which brings Muslims from all corners of the world to the holy city. This year, though, some concerns are overshadowing this event. Let's see.
It seems that this year many Muslim pilgrims will miss the annual pilgrimage to Mecca. The reason, construction work and fears of a deadly virus outbreak. As Saudi Arabia is gearing up for next week's Hajj, this year Riyadh expects about 2 million pilgrims, down 1 million from last year. The ultra-conservative kingdom announced a crackdown on illegal pilgrims and imposed restrictions to cut foreigners by 20% and Saudis by 50%. According to official Saudi figures and the World Health Organization, the so-called MERS virus, which appeared first in the kingdom last year, has killed 58 people worldwide, 49 of them in Saudi Arabia. Following the outbreak, Saudi authorities have appealed to ill and elderly people to avoid this year's pilgrimage, although there were no outbreaks of the deadly coronavirus registered at last year's pilgrimage. Health officials have also appealed to pilgrims to use masks that cover nose and mouth, since the deadly virus can be transmitted through the air. According to immigration officials, about 1.17 million pilgrims had already entered the Gulf state by last Saturday, and more are expected before Thursday's deadline for people to arrive before the Hajj starts. The pilgrimage is one of the 5 pillars of Islam that should be performed at least once in a lifetime by every Muslim who is financially and physically capable. This year, the pilgrimage starts on Sunday and ends on October 18.
And staying in the area, and international football officials face tough decisions regarding the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. The country has been under fire for its treatment of migrant workers preparing for the games, but they also have to decide whether to move the tournament to the winter months due to the fierce heat in the Gulf country during the summer. More from our I24 News Sports Magazine.
What has been discussed?
Tomorrow's what interests you.
Will you move the dates of the World Cup tomorrow?
No, it's tomorrow's a discussion. I don't know.
Is it impossible to have a vote?
I don't know for the moment. It's tomorrow.
It was impossible. Was Qatar
It's tomorrow.
FIFA is under heavy criticism these days since the British daily The Guardian reported that the migrant workers who build the infrastructures for the 2022 World Cup in Qatar suffer from harsh labor abuses.
Documented death on the construction sites. We were also very concerned about quality working conditions and housing conditions. And in addition, we criticized a lot the sponsorship system by which the migrant workers are dependent on the employer. And we request that this must be changed.
The international non-government organization Human Rights Watch is not the only body which is concerned with the deaths of migrant workers in Qatar. International labor unions have been protesting and calling to raise awareness, claiming that hundreds of workers die every year due to their working conditions.
There's a conspiracy of silence globally, and we're saying to FIFA, if there's no rights in Qatar, if you won't put conditions on the World Cup in Qatar, then rerun the vote. We're saying to governments, act. Workers' rights, workers' lives have to be more important than the money that Qatar's investing in your countries.
Protesters also marched to FIFA's headquarters in Zurich, chanting and brandishing red cards at FIFA. Meanwhile, FIFA executives are trying to dodge the bullets while refusing to confront the issue directly.
What's going to be discussed, Jim?
I think, quite honestly, the only important thing on the agenda is the question of Qatar and what will happen.
Do you think we'll get a decision today?
Well, I think we'll get a decision on what's going to happen next, but I'm, as I said before, I'm not prepared to prejudge what's going to happen at the meeting, and I don't honestly wish to say any more until after the meeting today.
FIFA boss Sepp Blatter, who is the main target of criticism, tries to brush off his critics and act like business as usual.
I told you I am going to Qatar now, and I will put the attention of Qatar to the situation we are facing with all the letters or demands we are receiving, but also on their responsibility, which you have on this paper, which will be distributed later. We have plenty of time concerning Qatar because it is 2022, it is in 9 years. So everything what will be there for the time being, and I have said, confirmation, we play in Qatar and we go forward.
While many around the world call to rethink Qatar's choice to host the World Cup, for FIFA, not deciding seems like the right decision. And in the meantime, they try to avoid the heat and not the Qatari one.
Tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Yes, and moving on. A glimpse into New York's theatrical scene reveals Sleeps No More, an intriguing performance which keeps growing and evolving with time. I24 News correspondent Shahal Peled brings us the sights and sounds of this unique piece of theater.
Broadway or off-Broadway shows in New York is the basic thing to do when arriving at the Big Apple. You wait in line, buy your tickets, and sit down in anticipation, awaiting the curtains to reveal the stage. But New York also offers a theatrical exploration unlike any other.
Sleep No More is a promenade theatrical experience where guests can journey through the McKittrick Hotel donning masks to give them a sort of anonymity and explore the world of the McKittrick Hotel, which is essentially Shakespeare's Macbeth set in a 1930s era Hitchcock-inspired hotel.
Originally a London production, Sleep No More evolved in New York into an interactive worker theatre, where people walk around the different floors of a warehouse transformed into hotel scenery and choose which character to follow.
Has grown from just a few rooms in an abandoned schoolhouse to over 100 rooms, over 100,000 square feet of space.
Over 300 viewers enter every night through the doors of the imaginary McKittrick Hotel, where they're asked to wear these strange masks throughout the 3-hour show, making them an anonymous audience and quite an horrific one. The masks are an essential part of the Sleep No More experience. They set apart the audience from cast members and allow the viewers to get as close as touching the performer.
You feel that you have this type of veil over you. So you can have whatever type of experience you would have for the individual you're following in the show.
The plot is an adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth, only the ruler of Scotland and his wife have moved into a film noir-styled fictional hotel in the heart of Manhattan. The tragic story is told through silence, with the performers dancing and moving around, sometimes completely naked. Some viewers find the experience a tad too abstract and intense.
It's very much the experience you're making for yourself, and if you don't want to explore too much, and if you're a little hesitant to explore, then it could be pretty overwhelming, I would say.
We have people who weep, people who laugh, people who are scared, people who are extremely exhilarated, and everything in between.
Originally on sale for just 6 weeks in early 2011, the performance was extended due to the great demand, adding new spaces and floors. If 3 hours of wandering in silence is too much for you, the recently added Gallo Green rooftop hotel restaurant is available. Or perhaps the Mandalay Bar could be a useful break for those seeking to listen to some late-night jazz in the middle of the show. Far from what is usually expected of a theatrical performance, this curious piece of theatre keeps the crowds anxious up to the very end, and most of those who survive it find it an experience for life.
Just so you know that our Shachar Peled having a jet lag and she went to sleep. Coming up after the break, our evening edition continues with the I-24 News Daily Debate. Don't go anywhere. 2 minutes break and I'll be back.